Another day, another headline, another mass shooting in one of the places in United States of America. While most countries across the world has tightened gun law, has restricted purchase of guns by the civilians after a large tragedy has struck them, America has seemed to be going in the other way. And why America, out of all the developed countries that we have in the world, witnesses highest cases of mass shooting, gun-based violence? Is it something that is related to the politics of US? Is it something that is related to the democratic functioning of the US? Or is it something that is deep-rooted in the American culture? Let us try to understand and decipher this in more detail. The question that we will try to answer today by this particular video is that why US seems to be obsessed with the guns and why no one want to part with this right as such. So first of all, to give you the context of this particular topic, what we have recently seen, there has been a shocking incident in the case that in this month itself, in the year 2025, Charlie Kirk, who is a well-known right-wing advocate, activist, has been killed by a sniper in the Utah, which is one of the states in the United States of America. Now, interestingly, it was the Charlie Kirk who earlier many times and most importantly in the month of April 2023 defended the gun death as a cost of freedom. He has stated that the violence that is taking place due to gun culture in US is a small price that Americans have to pay if they want to enjoy freedom to have and possess gun as such, and coincidentally he was the one who also got killed due to the gun violence. Now his death has reignited debate on America's gun culture. Now this debate is not something new, it has been there in the past, and no matter whether it is the government of Democratic Party, whether it is government of Republican parties, both parties have shied away from putting strict control around the purchase, selling and the control of guns by the civilians as such. So if you try to understand to what extent the problem is there in United States of America, and this we can simply understand by looking at the numbers. If you look at US population, it has the highest number of guns per capita. In other way, we can say that there are more number of guns in US as compared to the people. And the per capita guns in US is about 1.2, which is highest in the world, and 45% of all civilian population that you have in the United States of America are owning one or other type of gun. Now interestingly, it is not only the gun which is we can call as classify a simple rifle or revolvers, while many or majority of US population even have access to assault and semi-automatic guns. Now let us try to understand this and break down number in more simple manner. If you try to look at the gun homicides in US, if you start from year 1968, we can see that the number of suicides and homicides by gun was somewhere about 9,400 and by the year 2023, since then we have data from, it has climbed by almost 2 to 3 times to 27,000 to 17,000. That is correspondingly or respectively the suicides and homicide rate as such. 79% of all homicides that US has witnessed were by firearm. 58% of all gun death were suicide, and about 11 minutes we can say every 11 minutes in the United States of America about 128 gun deaths happen on daily basis. That means there are 46,728 gun deaths in the US in year 2023, and this should bring your attention to the gravity of the situation as far as the gun culture of US is concerned. Now before talking about that why such culture exists in US, I would want to bring your attention to the fact that Legacy IAS Academy, we are going to soon commence our batches. The batches are going to start on 22nd of September and 16th of October. This is going to be the weekday batch, that is you have classes all day between Monday to Friday. You also have weekend batches for those aspirants who are preparing along with jobs or along with studies. For them we had weekend batches that will commence on 4th and 25th of October. We have several features in our courses and programs. Some of these you can see being listed here. We ensure overall comprehensive coverage of all the general studies paper, optional paper, right to the end, and we also ensure integrated preparation by providing you a guidance right from the prelims, then to the mains, and all the way up to interview as such. We also have maximum policy of 40 students per batch so that the interaction between faculties and aspirants can be maintained to a greatest extent. Apart from that, if you want to know more detail about the course features, programs and everything, you can give a call to the number being displayed here. You can also download this Legacy app, and you can also click the link in the description box of the video. From here also you will be able to understand about these programs. Now coming back to this particular topic, if you look at the root of the American culture, either from history or from mythological perspective, it can be traced back to the 1791. We know that US became independent in 1776 by throwing the yoke of English colonialism, British colonialism, and in 1791 in the Constitution of US was introduced what is referred as Second Amendment. It is the Second Amendment that guarantees every individual in US, every American citizen, that they have right to bear arms as such. James Madison in this regard has stated that such kind of amendment is required, such kind of right and freedom is required to defend against tyranny. We have to understand this is rooted in the 1776 War of Independence, where it was the civilian population of America which took up arms and then resisted against the British control, and that is how they were able to gain freedom. To some extent, there is a linkage between the freedom that they gained and the importance of gun, especially the guns that were being held by civilians, had to play there. So overall, the entire revolution, 1776 revolution, and the overthrow of monarchy has created a very deep link or relation between holding a gun and the freedom or independence as such. Same thing we also have seen in the case of the conquest of Wild West, where US was able to exercise a great degree of control by using gun culture as such. And in this regard, we can take a note by the famous professor and author from US called as Richard Hofstadter. He has stated that American historical mythology about protective value of gun is something that is the driving factor, driving mechanism behind the present day gun culture also. If you look at the relation between the gun, slavery and racism, we know that for a long duration of time, especially the southern state of United States of America were dependent on slave labor, especially in the area where they were producing cotton, and guns were considered as essential by many people to ensure that they have a degree of control on the slaves in the cotton plantation. However, once Abraham Lincoln became president, he illegalized and basically we can say he abolished slavery. This has also resulted in the Civil War in the US. However, after the end of Civil War, post-Civil War, we can say the white population began to fear the black retribution, because the kind of injustice black population has faced during the slavery era, many of the white population and people believe that the black population or the Afro-American population of US will take revenge, and that is why there was sudden surge in the ownership of gun to protect against this what you can call as idea of the retribution. Apart from that, also we are seeing the rise of white supremacist group during this time, Ku Klux Klan. This also has been tied to the gun violence, and guns became what you can call as racialized tools of domination, and that is also how we can understand the link between the slavery and racism. Apart from that, also we have to understand that there is a great degree of capitalistic interest here. There is what you can call as in US gun capitalism, and there is a fetishism toward a particular commodity in the entire population. Now, also we have to understand that when World War II concluded, there were a large number of firearms all across the world, especially in the European countries, which were not required anymore by the Europeans. However, these cheap guns suddenly began to flood in the American market, and this became as a source of revenue generation by many of the companies here. And by using these cheap weapons, the gun industry of USA, which is today represented by an association called as NRA, National Rifle Association, began to build a mass consumer market. And if you are building a mass consumer market, you obviously will have to create a demand for it first. And this demand was created by selling stories, and this is something that we have seen is being done by the NRA. There was a degree of romanticization, there was a degree of heroic attitude, heroism that began to be attached and associated by the advertisement put by the NRA and gun capitalists as such. Now, because of such a huge market we had, such a huge marketing we had, we can say that guns became fetishized beyond material use, and it began to be equated with a symbol of freedom and masculinity in many parts of United States of America, especially the central and southern state of US as such. And this we can also understand how this has resulted in the kind of what you can call as the homicide rate, high homicide rate we have discussed before also. So if you compare all the developed countries, right, from the Japan all the way up to US, you can say the homicides per 100,000 population is highest among all the developed countries in US, and to a large extent this can be contributed to the free gun culture that US have promoted in the entire history as such. You compare that US has a homicide rate of 4.3 per 100,000 population, while Japan on the other hand has a homicide rate of 0.001. And compare all other countries, even the nearby Canada, which is a close country, neighboring country of US, have so small homicide rate. So this has to do with the culture itself. Now, also we can take example that how the US seems to have not learned any lesson from its violence, gun-based violence, and this we can contrast with Australia. In Australia also, before we had high homicide rate based on the gun access. So in 1996, Australian government brought a reform, Parliament brought a reform, and because of this reform, because of the restrictions in the purchase and sale of gun, the homicide rate in Australia fell drastically from 2.9 to just 0.88. On the other hand, in US, despite having higher instances of gun violence, it seems that the rules have become more loosened, and even judiciary has come in the favor of supporting use of guns and the possession of gun. Like for example, in the 2008, in the well-known Heller case, Supreme Court of United States of America has expanded the individual gun rights here. NRA's slogan, if you look, is something that appeals to the majority of the people of US, that states that good guy with a gun stops a bad guy. So many times when people possess gun, they do not possess it with the perspective or with the idea of harming someone. Many times they are also possessing gun with idea of stopping some bad guy as such. But again, during the heat of movement, when a good guy converts into bad guy is something that cannot be predicted. And reality, what the data says, that most of the gun homicides stem from the personal disputes in US, and this is also a very famous statement by Richard Hofstadter. He has stated that the most likely person to do us harm already has a key to the house. That means we have seen gun being used between husband and wife. We have seen gun being used between neighbors whenever there is a sudden increase or impulsive behavior. Apart from that, Arthur Kellerman has stated that guns at home increases the risk of homicide, and most of the violence, gun-based violence we have seen, is coming from the friends, families, and not strangers as such. And this is the human cost that US has to pay because of the loose gun rule and gun law. In conclusion, what we can say, that the US gun culture, by our discussion we can at least understand, it is not due to one reason, rather it is due to the mix of myth, history, you have the history of racism, the capitalism, and also to some extent politics, because you understand that any political party is not willing to take a strict action because they fear that the gun lobby will come against them and they will lose elections such. Charlie Kirk's death highlights contradictions of gun rights advocacy, because it was he who was advocating for the freedom to carry gun, and it was he who has been killed by the gun as such. But overall, the biggest question that stands and that basically should be asked to every American, and that is present in the mind of every American, is that the freedom of possessing gun which they are enjoying is coming at what cost, and is that cost justified? Unless and until a person is able to answer it correctly, we cannot see any change in the American gun culture as such. That is all about this particular video. If you like the video, please hit the like button, share it with your aspirants, and subscribe to the channel for more such content. Thank you very much.